Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be discussing the before and after photos of different legendary stadiums. We're going to be looking at the Polo Grounds, the Boston Garden, along with a few others, and kind of see how these stadiums / arenas evolved through the years, the different variations, the seats that were added, starting from construction to the destruction of these different legendary stadiums. So, Polo Grounds, that is the only construction image I could find of it being constructed like the original seating. Now, there's also another very famous photo. There's one of the earlier photos of Polo Grounds before any sort of extension was added in terms of the seating. That's the early 1900s right there. And the only photo I could get of the expansion underway where they added the second deck all the way around both sides is that one. And it's very unique because they're actually playing a game. This happened during the season, construction going on in the second deck. Now, when it comes to the Polo Grounds, the shape of it, the design, it is completely unique. You know, could they make something like this today? Maybe they could make some type of variation with like a two-deck approach in modern times. I know everyone is trying to kind of see something like that because the seating is better if you just do a two-deck approach and make it closer to the action and put the suites on top of the second deck. But the Polo Grounds, it's legendary. You know, we understand it's multi-purpose, but just the way it was designed, it is amazing. And then there are some really sad photos of its destruction. It would have been so awesome to see them at least keep the Polo Grounds alive somehow. It's very hard to play, actual competitive games there. The dimensions are just so ridiculous. But, imagine if they somehow restored the Polo Grounds and we had a home run derby or an all-star game or some type of one neutral site game there. That would be so cool if we somehow restored one of these older MLB stadiums and you could do 3 or 4 games a year. It would be just two teams playing a neutral site game, kind of like they do with the, baseball game in Iowa with the corn and stuff. That would be really cool, but some of these photos are pretty crazy. Actually, some of them in color, seeing the Polo Grounds being demolished. It is very sad, and that's probably the most famous photo of the Polo Grounds during its demolition. You can see the center field, kind of where the plaques were, the clock. Everyone knows that part with the advertising where it jets up and it's so deep to center field. It's just a very sad photo, but those are the pictures I could find of the Polo Grounds throughout each year. Next, we're moving on to Yankee Stadium, the first Yankee Stadium. You can see it went through a few different expansions. Now, when it was first made, it had a very small upper deck. It went through an expansion in terms of its upper deck, and then we all know about the second major expansion in 1973 where they made the upper deck massive. And it was honestly kind of ridiculous how big the upper deck was after the second kind of big-time expansion in terms of the seating overall. There are just some different photos of it. You can see the second deck getting expanded at the original Yankee Stadium in black and white. And then we do have the next expansion of Yankee Stadium where they ripped out all of the seats. It almost looked like they weren't renovating it. It looked like they were destroying it or taking out the seats to demolish it, but that was when they actually expanded it even more and made the upper deck 200 rows. And then there is photos of it being demolished, as you can see. Yankee Stadium, legendary, but when they did go through the quote-unquote renovation in 73, it did hurt the stadium significantly. I know people are going to look back on it with rose tinted glasses. They're going to say it was legendary. The new one is too corporate. It looks like a mall. I think they actually did a good job on the new Yankee Stadium that opened like what was it, 13, 14 years ago now, back in 2009. They did a good job on it. It's an impossible task, but I do know a lot of Yankee fans tend to complain about the fact that it's not a retractable roof, but I always tell people, listen, retractable roofs are ugly. They just are. I know it's hard to say because when people go to games and it's 30 degrees and it's raining and it rains out, I get it's annoying. But I am going to say, when you go to Yankee Stadium and it's 75 degrees and it's sunny, it just looks way more pleasing without any type of retractable roof attached to the side of it. I'm just saying that, and you can see it being demolished there with the new Yankee Stadium right next to it. They hollowed out all the seating, and then they ripped it down. I'm sure they they probably sold most, if not all, of those old Yankee Stadium seats because the Yankees are such a popular historical franchise. A lot of people would want a Yankee Stadium seat for like $100 or $200 or whatever they ended up selling some of those for, because I'm sure they did sell them. And that's kind of the process you see when it comes to these stadiums being demolished. They'll rip out all the seats, and then they'll start taking apart sections of the upper deck. Even with something like the Kingdom where they implode it, these seats get ripped out first just because it's easier in terms of the cleanup, and they're able to sell some of them. The next historic stadium we're going to be looking at is Kaminsky Park with the Chicago White Sox, of course, and really not a ton of renovations. They did change the color of the seating a few times, and there's some... Kaminsky Park was, in terms of just the seating, just crazy that it was able to jam the amount of people. Just looking at this, I would say it probably sits about 36,000, when in reality it was about 12 or 13,000 more than that. And then there is a very famous photo of it right next to the new Kaminsky Park, which is now guaranteed rate field. And why don't you take a guess? Which one has a higher capacity? It's the one on the left. Isn't that amazing? That just goes to show you the modern building. And that upper deck at new Kaminsky Park was such an eyesore, they had to chop off the top 8 rows of it like 2 years into its life. That's how bad it was and how big and overbearing it was. But yeah, guaranteed rate park, a complete step down. I don't know why they didn't do some kind of similar design to the old Kaminsky Park in Chicago, make it like a modern version. It was such a great design with the 2-deck approach. You could totally do something modern like that now. I will say, I always love when they're building another stadium right next to the old one. Imagine going down that road in between both of them. And it's just cool to see 2 MLB diamonds right next to each other because you never see it, and then one of them gets knocked down. When it comes to just looking at Kaminsky Park, it's very clear. I know people were saying maybe they could renovate it. There's really no way. I mean, look at the exterior of it. It's just so outdated. You would just have to build like a modern version of it. Like a renovation would basically just completely hollowing out the entire interior and like redesigning it. It's just not big enough for a modern stadium. You would have to completely redo it. But they went with a totally different design. They made a massive upper deck that had a bunch of horrible seats in the new Kaminsky, but that is just that. And then you can see it being demolished there with the green seatings at the time. Those are always sad photos when you see a legendary baseball stadium get demolished. The next one we're going to be looking at, I guess, let me use the term legendary very loosely in this situation. It's Shea Stadium. Now, Shea was a very interesting one. It's almost like a little bit more than a half circle. It's like a perfect half circle, actually, like a half donut, just looking at it. But yeah, there is some construction photos of it. There is some different photos of it during when the Mets played there. It was a multi-purpose. But Shea Stadium, I mean, look at that great outfield seating. That's just beautiful. And then it has the massive scoreboard in right field. What was it? Mike Piazza hitting it off the scoreboard. You remember when Felix Hernandez hit a grand slam at Shea Stadium? I mean, I was too young for it, but I've seen it on YouTube and things like that. Felix Hernandez hitting a grand slam at Shea Stadium. But, its exterior, look at, this is just such a great design. The exterior design is literally like the walking ramps. So, the ramps to where you can walk up to each next level. That's what the design is. That's what those things are. And then it did get demolished. They ended up building Citi Field. The new Citi Field and the new Yankee Stadium both opened the same year. So there was a lot of construction in and around New York and the Bronx in 2008 because both of the new stadiums were going up. When it comes to Citi Field, I gotta say, and I think this is probably a pretty popular opinion, it's kind of a swing and a miss. I mean, it's not horrible, but I don't know, man. It's just got an obnoxious upper deck. And maybe that's because it was built in 2008, 2009, but the new Citi Field, let's be real, it could have been done a little bit better. I just don't like the design. I don't like the massive left field upper deck. That's a big no-no for me in terms of the overall, ballparks and the way that they're built and stuff like that. But there is Shea Stadium getting ripped to shreds, and there is Citi Field being constructed, and Shea Stadium's last days right next to it. Those are always some nice images to look at. And then finally, we are looking at the Boston Garden, which is probably my favorite interior arena design. I am so surprised no architect at least kind of like mimicked this design to maybe a minimal degree. You don't want to completely copy it, but when you look at the old Boston Garden and the way the upper deck kind of jetted up, I just love that design. The two-deck approach, and then you have the suites in the upper area. I'm surprised no one's taken that design and really used it. And the old Boston Garden, the thing with arenas that are interesting in terms of them being demolished, you actually get to see the interior with light on it because it's being demolished, and you can kind of see the outside coming in on it, which is something you never get to see with arenas because, of course, they are completely closed. But there is the old legendary Boston Garden being demolished, and I think they did a good job on TD Garden, which is the new Boston arena for the Celtics and the Bruins, but it's not as good as the legendary older one. There's no doubt about that. So that is that. Just wanted to go through a few different legendary stadiums being demolished through the years, when they were built, when they were used, and when they were demolished. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.